started here in the interest of respecting your time and getting to something pretty cool. We collectively with Wines of South Africa a number of years ago started to celebrate Drink Chenin Day, which is on June 20th this year. It's always the third Saturday of June. And contrary to potential belief, the Drink Chenin Day is an invention by two winemakers in Oregon, actually, Kate Morrison and Tom Monroe, who run the Division Wine Company. And both of them are really fascinating people. They worked harvests all over the world, including in the Loire Valley, which inspired them to create this Drink Chenin Day concept in 2014. And just like anything, you know, let's throw the spaghetti against the wall and see, but it really stuck with those who love Chenin Blanc. And Chenin Blanc, much like, you know, Riesling and Burgundy and so on and so forth, once you get hooked with it, it's really hard to kind of get away. So it created its own tribe, and it's grown bigger than the whole concept originally started, adapted appropriately so by South Africa. So we've always tried to celebrate it, but not in a, you know, over the top sort of way, but we need people to know how cool this grape variety is. This year, we are joined by two phenomenal winemakers, and we'll be tasting 4 wines between them that represent what Chenin Blanc is. Hold on, someone's not on mute here. Let's mute everyone up. We're going. There we go. That's better. So, and we're going to go through these wines specifically, but also have a dialogue on how they relate. We'd like to talk about the state of the industry as well, a little bit, where Chenin Blanc was compared to where it is now and where it is going, even in the short period of time. If you were to take a 5-year window, it is this amazing trajectory. And while it's never going to compete with the likes of Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Grigio in a volume perspective, it very well might in people's hearts, especially at the on-premise level, and it still represents phenomenal value. So from that specific point, I would like to briefly introduce our two speakers here, our two winemakers. We have Jacques de Klerk, who is the winemaker for Radford Dale and a host of wineries, wine brands underneath that. I won't go too far into it because you're going to hear a lot from him, and Bouvin Rats of the eponymous Rats estate. The 4 wines we'll be tasting in order are Bruce Jack, the Pierce Freedom, Vinum, and the Rats. Now, we do not have Bruce Jack here, though Bouvin, everyone is within ear distance. We've had Bruce Jack here a number of times for our Chenin Blanc and our Wines of South Africa events. He's easily one of the most interesting individuals, interesting and verbose, but not in a negative way. His story is absolutely phenomenal. He was the first South African winemaker to attend Roseworthy College in Australia. I would say he was probably one of the first to create a virtual winery in the 90s in South Africa by operating out of Cape Town and leasing grapes. This concept in the New World was often reserved for large estates. He now has a number of brands, one of which being the Drift, which is an absolutely stunning estate where there are prehistoric remains of humanity's ancestors, graves from over 40,000 years ago on this specific estate, creating some really cool wines, including some Barbera, just fun stuff, right? He has a literature background, which leads him to be quite philosophical in his thinkings, which translates to the wines. But I'd like to pass this over to Bouvin, who can give us some context with these specific wines and this one in particular. Bouvin, if I may let you start off.
Sure. The Bruce Jack Chenin Blanc 2020 comes from Western Cape origin, but the vineyards are located specifically in the Breda Kloof. Now, if you look at the Breda Kloof as a region, it's basically the Breda River, which means wide river, that runs through this valley. So they are quite arid around it. So they have to irrigate, and which they obviously do. So they usually farm, most of it is next to the riverbank, so you mostly deal with deep alluvial soils. And in this valley, there is sort of side rivers and that branches off. But for general, it's quite considered in South African terms a warmer region. And typical of Bruce, he went and found a special pocket of vineyard there that had some uniqueness, and he used it. And the breeder Kloof have sort of initiated, and they've picked Chenin Blanc as their sort of main focus. So for the last 10 years, they have done a lot to promote Chenin Blanc from their area, which of course is very great for South Africa, is that they're focusing on Chenin Blanc. And that's always needed, because if you can look at especially older growing wine regions, they have a bit of everything, and they can easily get lost in a sea of a lot of white wine varieties. But the breeder Kloof has sort of gone out and said, we focus on Chenin Blanc, and that's what we wanted to do. So I think that in the past, that it was an area where there was more volume production coming through. But in the last 10 years, I must say, there's smaller producers that started producing from single vineyards and from soil-specific and site-specific Chenin Blancs, and there's been a lot of exciting stuff coming out of the breeder Kloof of late. And obviously, Bruce have identified this and used that opportunity with Chenin Blanc. So, and this particular vineyard is quite high. It's 240 meters, so definitely more up on the slopes. And he uses normal VSP trellis system. And what he also said is that he has, there's an older and a younger component here. And the older ones, he matures in older French barrels, not so much new oak. And then the balance of the younger vintage, he uses stainless steel. And then he makes sort of a blend of the two younger and the older vineyards, obviously from the older ones being in the barrel component.
So I'm going to quickly toss up a map here just to put in context the contrast between the wine where this specific, the area where this specific wine is sourced from, where the grapes are. Here's the Breda Kloof right here. So it's fairly inland, right? And the farther inland you go from False Bay, generally the warmer it gets, right? The other three wines will be sourced largely from Stellenbosch, right? At varying levels of proximity. So another aspect to bring up here as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, the wines in the Breda Kloof, or at least this specific wine, is sourced from alluvial soils, while the next three wines will be sourced from old granitic soils. So something to keep in context when building, when comparing these specific wines. As far as tasting, we'd like to get your comments first here. It'll be fascinating to see how this one specifically compares to the other. Is there something to be said relative to the alluvial soil? Is there something to be said compared to the granitic? Let's see, who would like to volunteer before I ask someone? Your camera off doesn't mean that I'm not going to ask you. No? Gurvinder, thoughts?
I think, the fact that you mentioned that it being inland and a little bit warmer, I think that comes across a little bit. You get that nice kind of peachy kind of character to it, and it is a little bit more voluminous in the mouth as opposed to having just that linear quality to it. Although, it's got nice acidity on the finish and stuff, but definitely I think the ripeness of the fruit definitely comes through.
That was like our exact note when we tried this. Like Laurel said the exact same thing. That is absolutely cool to hear. Does everyone else agree? Like, can you even not? Please go ahead and compare the other wines next to it to give some context. But you're all professionals. Do you see that sunshine? Do you see that alluvialness, if you will? Does it reflect? Potentially, yeah, cool. Well, I mean, at 13.95, to find something that's in the Ontario market, I believe. So it'll bounce in and around there. Um, Pretty fascinating when you think about the entry level position of this wine, and price point quality dollar ratio. So, any thoughts, questions in addition to that? It's kind of nice little warm up. Who else? Who? And this is brought in. Uh, let's see. This is brought in
That's Lifford as well.
at Lifford, absolutely, and that's actually going to be in the stores. Or it was released. It was
Yeah,
just
it was
released.
already. Yeah, I was gonna say it was already released.
It was
Yeah,
released a few
This
days
past
ago.
Saturday, I think.
So that's kind of great timing for Drink Chenin Day if you want that little soft sell, that easy way, that kind of eke in there. And Chenin Blanc, as you already know, especially from South Africa, can balance off that the extremes. One of the challenges is getting that conversation forward, right? It's often not clear on the label without trying it. Well, what style is it? Even geographically, when it says Western Cape, you're not particularly, you don't necessarily know how it's going to come through. But this one does seem to actually translate a bit of that warmth and that entry. When I say entry level, like gateway Chenin Blanc, probably a good way to go about it. You know, first one's free, and then you're hooked. Jacques, you are going to be speaking to the next two wines, if you would not mind.
I do not.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the next one that we have in our lineup is the Pierce Predom Chenin Blanc 2019. And I think a lot of you will already know about this collaboration that we have with Will and with Nick Pierce. We've done, wow, how many is it now, Will? Three, five?
The 19th is 19th is the 5th, and the 20th will be the 6th. So yeah, that would be
okay.
right.
Well, it's gone quickly, but you know, it started off as an idea, and it sort of became a little experiment, and then it became a full-fledged project. You know, it's quite an important part of our business now, as well as, I believe, Nick's business too. And you know, we've always had a lot of fun with it, and the way that we've made this wine has always been in a sort of a collaborative spirit. Sometimes we have the pleasure of welcoming our whole group to come and taste with us, and then we spend an afternoon around a table with a bunch of Chenin Blanc samples, and you know, try and put together the most amazing thing that we can. Other times, you know, we do it actually via video link, and this was the case with the 2019. We did this one before, you know, video link and Zoom tastings and this kind of stuff was even, you know, nobody had ever really done anything like that. Now it's, of course, just the only way, but we thought we were kind of cool at the time to do this. And so the idea behind Pierce Predom Chenin Blanc has always been that this wine has to hit 11 on the smashability index. It's got to be super drinkable. And so over the last few vintages, we have really dialed in exactly which parcels fit the best. And it is a combination of 5 parcels from 3 vineyards. And you might be thinking like, whoa, 5 parcels, 3 vineyards, how does that work? And it's mainly because one of the blocks is a very big block. It's a 4.5 hectare vineyard in the Polka Dry Hills, part of Stellenbosch. It's on super granitic soil, but crucially, it's also on a very steep slope. So the top and the bottom differ quite a bit from each other. And over the years, we've realized that there are actually parcels within this parcel, in this block. So we've outlined different parts of this block that we farm differently. We pick it at different ripeness levels, and then we treat it differently in the cellar. And then the other 2 vineyards are slightly younger. The one that I was just talking about now was 49 in in 2019, and the other two are slightly younger, and those vineyards bring a little bit more acidity. They bring more flint to it, whereas the old vineyard really brings the intensity to it. And so we've also, at the time when we started this collaboration, we'd been working, experimenting with a little bit of skin contact in our Chenins, and we were trying that out, and we quickly saw that the skin contact gave the wine a great texture, because it felt to me at the time when we started experimenting like that a lot of Chenins derived their texture from either batonnage, some lees contact, or oaking, or whatever, and so the wines seemed to be quite oily, and they were quite round, and it occurred to me that maybe we can get some texture from another source, which is the skins, of course, the phenolics, and it adds a real sort of cut and a real grip to the palate there, which I quite enjoy. 2019 was for me one of those dream vintages, a lot like 2017, in the sense that we had the cool nights and we had like a long, slow ripening season. Even December, from middle December to middle January, we had very cool nights, and that's very good because you get a good diurnal range, and that preserves the acidity. And so 2019, I find it quite bright. It's got really bright acidity, and the flavors are very fresh. Citrus is the overriding sort of character that I would describe here, and there's more citrus. There's more than just citrus. It's like a grapefruit, and there's lime, but the palate as well doesn't seem pointy or skinny. It feels like it's quite well rounded. So yeah, very nice balance in 2019, and I think it's probably one of my favorites at the moment to drink.
Cool. I mean, this has been very well supported by the majority of you over the number of years. We designed this to be something specifically for hospitality, and it still is there because we priced it accordingly. We want to bring Chenin Blanc to people, and this was the style of Chenin Blanc that really, when I visited the first few times, really opened my eyes. And to be able to work with Jacques on it, super cool. That's enough of the plug, but like a lot of it has to do with use. Currently, it's now available still through Nicholas Pearce Wines online, and because of what you've done, like it's almost a social experiment by having Chenin Blanc on by the glass lists and by the bottle lists in all these great places. It's created this movement over the last few years where the door has been wedged open a little bit more for Chenin Blanc in general. Right. And I find that to be something absolutely incredible to be a part of. Now, to work with Jacques, like let's move over to the Vinum. So also made by Jacques, also made by Radford Dale, but in context and delivery, and obviously vintage variation, of which I believe Angela was actually in with you in 2018, working harvest.
Yep.
Which is kind of cool.
I haven't had a chance to say hello yet, Angela. How are you, super wine girl?
I'm good, Jacques. How are you?
Yeah, nice to see you again.
I know. Looking forward to finally trying our wines. What a vintage that was, eh?
2018 was different to 2019 in the sense that it was quite warm. We didn't have those cool nights, and the vintage seemed more compressed. And so, whereas 2019 things were happening sort of at a more chilled pace, 2018 was not that. We were harvesting as quickly as we could, and mainly because we've got in South Africa, and especially around Stellenbosch, where it's not really a cool climate. We have to really fight for every little bit of acidity that we can get. So we were really scrambling a little bit in 2018 to get the Chenin Blanc in. So the vineyards that produce this wine, the Vinum, Radford Dale Vinum Chenin, are the same vineyards that produce the Pierce Predon, but the components aren't all the same, and we don't put them together in the same way, if that makes any sense. You know, we tweak the blend. Obviously, because if you're going to make so many Chenins, you don't want them to look all the same. And so with Venom, the idea is to have a bit more of a generous wine. We want the wine to have like a deeper texture, and we want it to have a bit more generous fruit. And the 2018 also now has had another year in bottle, and it shows a lot more, shall I say, friendliness. Whereas the Pierce Breton is geared towards refreshment. I think this wine is geared more towards reward. It's more complex, and it seems more, or shall I say, it seems less racy than the 2019. It seems a bit more settled. In terms of the winemaking, there isn't a lot of difference between the two. All of our wines are naturally fermented. We don't mess around with too many additives or anything like that. And we really try and just nail the picking date, because I've always believed if you focus on the freshness, then you can avoid having to add a lot of acidity and all of those things. So you take away that sort of that crutch, and it makes you focus on your vineyards and when to pick and that kind of thing. In terms of oaking, there's a slightly more new oak in 2018, and that is just a function of expanding the volumes. We had to in 2018 expand the volumes a little bit, and we didn't have enough barrels, so I ordered a few new ones, and that has given the wine a lot more. I'd call it a creme brulee kind of overlay. The fruit has got sort of a creaminess to it, and I think that is derived by the oaking. But still, I think it carries it well, and it's got a lovely balance.
David, I saw you nodding a whole bunch there. Is what Jacques saying translating to the wines? Let me unmute you there. Oh, gotta get you to unmute.
Yeah.
There you are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fun to compare the two different winemaking styles and vintages from the same plots. I really do love the texture of the Radford Dale. Beautifully sort of silky, but it's still solid. Good structure to it, good length. And I made a comment before on the Pierce Breton that I was really picking up the indigenous yeast fermentation, or the wild ferment on it, and which I find more obvious there than in the second wine. And maybe that's just because there's now oak involved as well. But
yeah, good point. Definitely. What are the volume like? We don't need to get too deep into that, but I think mostly like we're seeing a contrast there of stylistic, like those two wines I find kind of go hand in hand. They're for different individuals. The Venom comes through the LCBO, I believe, fairly regularly. And what's the price point, Laurel? Do you recall?
18.
It's 18?
Yeah, 18
Christina?
bucks.
Sorry. I buy it up when I see
Good.
it.
Yeah.
That's great. So again, we're in the sub 20, but like it's pretty cool that Jacques using site specific. We're again in another kind of site specific blend component here, emphasizing, value is not necessarily the best word, but like you're finding some really cool usage of juice and grapes for these wines that are quite approachable in price. If I may now move over to Bruvert. Bruvert, can you give a little, background also to Rats itself? Because you're one of the, trendsetters, in my opinion, and your wines have always reflected the greatness of Chenin Blanc.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. Yes, I pretty much after I finished viticultureology, I went to work in Bordeaux. I worked in Upper Valley. I worked in Germany. I ended up running a small little cellar in Tuscany. And what I've realized that the most successful people in the world of wine is people that specialize. So after that, I returned to South Africa and I wanted to start my surname is Rats. I started Rod's Family Wines in 2000 to specialize in one white and one red variety. So my white was Chenin Blanc, and my red variety was Cabernet Franc. So we've been, and you know, if you go 20 years back in South Africa, Chenin Blanc was always sort of the working donkey. And the reason why we currently sit with 53% of all the Chenin Blanc in the world is because they planted it so much for brandy distilling. And then, and the problem was is that, you know, if you take a thoroughbred horse and you turn it into a working donkey, then don't expect to win the races. So the problem was not with Chenin Blanc, the problem was that how we treated it. So at that stage, there was a couple of us that started focusing on Chenin Blanc and gave it the same treatment that all the other sort of novel varieties received. And the idea was then to do with Chenin Blanc what Argentina did with Malbec, or what New Zealand did with Sauvignon Blanc, claim it and make it our own. And that was our uniqueness that we had, because nobody else in the world had the volume or the history with Chenin Blanc to actually do it from a New World perspective, of course. So that was how Rod's Family Wines came about.
This specific wine, this is the first, is this the first time this has been to this market? Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. The Eden high density single vineyard. I will just hold it up because most people probably have not seen that, I would suspect, and it's fairly new.
As far as this specific wine then, granitic soils, again, where are you sourcing specifically from?
If you don't mind, well, I'm just going to tell the story because
Yeah.
This is quite a unique wine for Rod's Family Wines, but also from a South African perspective, is that Eden, if you look on the label, it says Eden. So my little farm is called Eden. And we're situated on the southern slope of a decomposed dolomite granite hill in Stellenbosch. So Stellenbosch is divided up into 7 wards, and our ward is called Polkadrai. And we basically have one homogeneous soil, and that's decomposed dolomite granite. So Eden comes from the name of my farm. Then high density, meaning that I planted it high density. Now, what's that unique is this is the first ever release of high density single vineyard in South Africa. So nobody have released from a high density vineyard a single wine yet. So that was not just the first for us, it was the first for South Africa, and what I believe is for Africa, because nobody else have done it. So, and then obviously single vineyard is that it comes from that specific plot. What I did was, in 2005, there was a Cabernet vineyard on, and the previous owner has really farmed it very commercially. So he killed everything, and the soil was so hard that if you use a spade and you hit the ground, it will actually bounce off. So what I did is I ripped out the vineyard, and then we broke the soil with a ripper. And then it took me 3 years because I wanted to restore the natural state of the soil. So in the first year, I planted triticale, which is rich in biomass, and just left it grow for a year and then rot back into the soil. In the second year, I used lupine, which is very high in nitrogen, and let it rot back into the soil. And in the third year, we planted oats, which is obviously very high in phosphates. So by the third year, the farmers in the area said I was a wheat farmer, because every time they drive by my house, I just see all these cover crops and a vineyard. But basically, we took 3 years to actually restore through natural cover crop, rotating it every year, all the things you would have done just before you plant a new vineyard. And then we planted 1 by 1.2 meters, and which is 8,000 vines per hectare. And the reason for that is that, I mean, 2/3 of a vine is underneath the ground. and only 1/3 is above. So if you really want to create competition, it's much better to do it underneath the ground. So it's only 0.6 hectares of Chenin, and then there's a 0.2 hectares of Cabernet Franc. So it's really tiny. And so what you find is that I use a clone called Montpellier. Now, Montpellier clone came into South Africa in the late 60s. And soon as it was released, farmers found out that it actually gives a very low yield. It had small berries, loose bunches, and it gave you 6 tons or 7 tons, even under irrigation. So by the late 70s, most people have ripped it out. They didn't plant it again. And I wanted to plant this Montpellier. I actually found a small little block that couldn't be ripped out because of a water line that blocked the farmer. And I made wine of it, and I realized the immense quality that these small berries and low yield can give you. So luckily, I found the mother block, which was in the Nay Valley, actually near in the Breeder Kloof, to be quite honest, that we earlier spoke about. And I phoned the guy up, and he had it, and he said, we're going to rip it out the next day. So while we were collecting the planting material of the Montpellier clone on the one side, the bulldozer were actually ripping it out from the other side. So then we propagated, and the next year, 2009, I actually planted these high-density Montpellier clone Chenin Blanc. And this is the first time in 35 years that anybody planted Montpellier clone. And because the mother block now has been ripped out, this Eden has become the mother block for Montpellier clone in South Africa, because this is the closest that relation at this point in time. There's not much left in any event. So, and because it is high density, what makes this wine quite amazing, the yield, I must tell you, because of this, it's almost a double whammy, because the Montpellier clone has small berries and loose bunches. So you already get a low yield from that. And on top of that, we're using high density, and that also lowers your crop because the root competition. So we get, and this is still a young vineyard, we get 2.5, 3 tons a hectare if we're very lucky. So, so you have a very, very low yield. And because you got, if you have a normal vertical hedge, you've got a sunny side and a shady side. Now, because this is just a vine that's trellised on a pole, you find that you have sun penetration throughout the growing day. So you get quite a phenolical ripeness, but at very low sugars and still great acidity. So this and if you taste the wine, you'll see that on the nose, it has that typical sort of little bit of golden, delicious pineapple, peach blossom, but it also have that citrus, limey, that almost orange peeliness. On the palate, you find it's quite wide and rich, but then that beautiful pear shape of Chenin Blanc on the palate, where it goes into your palate quite wide, but at the end it focuses that almost wrong way around pear shape in your mouth. And obviously the granitic soil always have, or the result of that is that you always have great acidity. And on top of the fact that because of the exposure of the sun, we can get ripeness in much lower sugars and early in the season. So most of the ripening happens in the late part of spring and early part of summer. So we ripen the fruit in the cooler part of the season. So you always have that beautiful freshness, that what I call the minerality you get on these decomposed dolomite granite soils that you find here in my little area, Polkadry, is what I call that whetstone minerality. And how I describe it is that these granite rocks, if you have a rainstorm on a hot day, and the water that falls down, you almost get a vapor from that. And that's what I call whetstone minerality, which is on the nose, it's on the finish, it's just all over this wine.
Yeah, that's quite the jump right there. And I mean, having you here to express that, obviously with your mental roots with Loire all the way through, and then seeing the translation from that to South Africa. Michael, you're quite familiar with South African Chenin Blanc. I'd like to get your perspective on the Eden. Is this the first time you're trying it? Is this the first time? How about this? Show of hands, who's tried this before? Yeah, nor have I. This is super new to me. So, Michael, what are your observations?
Oh, I'm sorry, Will, but you've interrupted my 500-word tasting note that I'm in the process of composing. But that's okay because there might be 500 more. No, this is really special. No, I've never tasted it before. I can't say that it doesn't remind me of other very special Cape Chenin Blancs that I have tasted, because there is some, there are the others in my minds, Ken's FMC, and you think of things that Chris Allheit and Duncan Savage and Donovan Rawl and so many other people have made. There's a pantheon that this definitely resides in. But what's so special about it is and the acidity was mentioned. It's intense and incredible acidity, but it's never sharp or dominant or on top of everything. It controls the project for sure, but it's really special. So I'm sure that this polka dry and this vapor of whetstone that we're talking about here is really what it's all about. Great wine. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, very cool. But like, I mean, what a jump in contrast. There's a question here about clones. What is the most used clone for Chenin in Stellenbosch? Could either of you kind of comment on that? Maybe more important, what does that clone emphasize when planted in Stellenbosch?
There's a couple now. Now, what happened is that most clones that we still have, which is older vineyards, which came in up till the 80s, were selected. A good clone was something that could do 20 to 30 tons a hectare, because they were selected for volume production. And that's why something like the Montpellier clone fell out of favor, because it was giving a low yield. And that's why people ripped it out and didn't want to plant it. What have happened is in the late 90s, they started with a plant bettering scheme, and we started bringing in clones from the Loire in particular that was more quality focused. So the clones that are available that are good are clone 22, clone 29, 222, just to give a few, but those are probably, but I would say clone 29 and 26 is probably currently from that perspective the highest quality clones that we use, but they all sort of planted in the last 20 years. So there has always been a water shift from the old clones to the new clones, and I think anybody today that are planting Chenin Blanc definitely uses the new French clones that we have selected.
Yeah, Brewer, that's 100% true. It's something that definitely did divide, shall we say, the brandy vineyards from the good Chenin vineyards. But lately I've been seeing the University of Stellenbosch clones being planted more often. And that's interesting because these are some of the first clones that have been actually selected for South African conditions. And that's kind of special, right? It's Chenin Blanc for South Africa, from South Africa. And yeah, things like the US 708, that's
the UC Davis clone Chardonnay, yeah.
I was gonna say I've been to Loire Valley 3 times, so the climates are different, I imagine, from Stellenbosch. There's a big difference there.
No, well, I don't know. I've not been yet, but hoping to go soon, as soon as we can.
The summers are getting hot, though.
Yeah, but I mean, I really like the idea of as Brewer said, owning for South Africa, owning Chenin Blanc, and if we can start to really select our own clones for our own conditions, that means that the grape is going in the right direction locally.
Jacques, you're 100% correct. And what they also found was that as these clones, especially if they've been here for over 40, 50 years, the vine actually adapts to its condition as well. So you're 100% right. There's definitely some movement in that direction. And the only problem we still have there is that, they were still selected for volume production. So that's one thing we must just be mindful of in moving in this direction, that we actually make sure that they move into a direction where you get lower yield and obviously a higher quality. But I mean, I'm very well aware of the project, and that that's definitely, it's out there, and let's see how it goes. But I can't agree more. Is that Chenin, we did found that Chenin changed itself according to the climate and the conditions, and I think that's definitely something we would like to see. I mean, originally all of the clones came from France. So, but these now you've seen the second or the third generation of a clone that have adapted to our conditions, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, that kind of is a good segue to a question Billy poses, which is one that occurs all the time about geographical origin and how that translates on the bottle. From my perspective, and I'd love to get yours, since 1994, there was kind of like an evolution due to free and open markets in wine thinking, wine mentality. There's exchange of ideas and growth. So there's this explosive growth, but in a very short period of time, relatively speaking, in the wine world. The ward system and the geographical origin system was part of a bureaucratic approach to whatever it may be. There are wards without any vineyards in them, but at the same time, the global consumer, at least the New World consumer, has learned to associate geography with placeness. When we start getting more specific, it'd be really cool to be able to say, okay, well, this tastes like, Polka Dry Hills specifically, and some wineries do label as such, but the vast majority have Western Cape, so on and so forth. At a specific point, the Helderberg. That's a great. That's a house phone. Have you guys heard from a house phone in a long time? All I know is that is a telemarketer, or I need my ducts cleaned. That's the only. But I will just let that go in a second. But perhaps you'd like to shed some light on that, Bruvert, on what on the ward system and geographical origin labeling.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when they demarcated it previously, they're much more, they would use a railway line, or they would use a national road as the separation between Stellenbosch and Paarl, for instance. And we very soon realized that when the industry started modernizing and we became part of a global, that we need to do it via origin. So the borders have been moved a bit, and I think where the most work have been done is to actually with wards, where they started saying that Simonberg is a ward, Helderberg is a ward, Bannock is a ward, and Polka Dry Hill, where they actually just look within Stellenbosch, then go with the microscope and say, listen here, in this little area, obviously you have to apply from producer point of view to get a ward, and then they come and look at the geographics, and they look at the soil, and they say, well, that is quite homogeneous, and it does have a special sort of terroir and a climate. So, and that will then qualify it for award. So it's done much more scientifically and according to terroir. So I think that's somewhere that have added great benefit to our classification system in terms of origin. And there's already 7 wards in Stellenbosch, and I would suspect in the next couple of years there might be even more. But I mean, they go through quite a rigorous process, a terroir process, before you get a classification for a particular ward. Polka Dry Hills, as you pointed out, is the newest, but also the smallest ward in Stellenbosch. So we only got it in 2008. So it's early days for us, but we're just a handful of producers here, and it's very small. So, from the little bit I know that Chenin Blanc does extremely well, and by the way, Cabernet Franc as well. Both of these varieties do well on these granitic soils.
It's hard for Canadians not to consider Cabernet Franc. It's something very, very close to the majority of us. So you're speaking to kindred spirits here for certain. If I could pose a question to Julie, who's run a number of great wine programs here in Toronto. Your experience with Chenin Blanc, you've had a few by the glass over the years. If you're going to take and by the bottle, if this is a snapshot of Chenin Blanc for 2021, what's being offered right now, how would you compare it to what you've experienced in the past? Has it evolved? Has it stayed the same? What are the differences?
Honestly, it's a tough question to answer because I haven't actually served a guest in a year now to see what has changed. But I do have, I'm working on 4 reopening wine lists right now, and I have actually your Chenin Blanc coming on one of them by the glass. It is at a site that I'm not actively on the floor at, but I can say I have seen, and working with Chenin by the glass probably now for 3 or 4 years, I'm ordering it more frequently. Like, it is starting to pick up. It's selling. I think people are more knowledgeable about the varietal. It's becoming less of a focused hand sell at a table, and there's more recognition where people are kind of comfortable to order it and know what they're getting without needing like someone to be there kind of selling them on it. I work with Loire Valley, Chenin's at another property, Vouvray, and again, there's some recognition of that as a region, but I definitely think it's picking up a lot of traction. Like, it's becoming a wine and a grape variety people are very familiar with, and people, again, I think people seem more open just in terms of wines from South Africa. Like, I'm not finding it's like something that I need to push maybe like I would have 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Can I just add on to that for Jules?
Yeah.
So your Chenin, or this Chenin, I mean, I've worked with it for almost 5 years now at George. It's been on BDG for at least that length. Like, it's been there forever. At a fine dining restaurant where you can kind of push any wine on anyone, whenever we have someone asking, I just want white wine, and they don't know what, they just white wine. Actually, this is usually in my hands. I usually do a side-by-side with at least 2 bottles. I mean, I only have so many hands and glasses, so I pick 2 bottles. Usually the Chenin is in my hands, because most people won't order it themselves. So I force it on people, and I would say 7 out of 10 times it's the pick. And I change it. I mean, I'm always changing, my other offering or what I'm showing with them, but it's usually my side-by-side lineup. And once we get it in the glass, the reception of people they're like, wow, South Africa. Like, it's just, it's pretty outstanding. My heart always warms a little bit. With a lot going on, and a guest doesn't know what they want to drink, it makes our job harder. But I know this is like this specific Chenin, but also just Chenin over the years. I've done that so many times, and it's always been, once we force it into the glass, the response has been amazing.
Cool. Well, thank you. But like, that door is open, right? I mean, we have some phenomenal other producers that are here regularly, like Ken Forrester does a killer job with his levels of Chenin Blanc, the Molyneux. I mean, we're seeing more and more quality Chenins at all price points now. I need to correct myself. I was looking at last year's date. It's actually June 18th. My apologies. Coming up here. It's on my calendar. Whoops. Wah, wah. But nonetheless, it's hopefully, like, usually the last number of years, it's always been sunny, that kind of 20 to 25, it might be even hotter kind of day. But these styles of Chenin and Chenin Blanc in general, especially from South Africa, we're seeing fresher examples. We're seeing that all around the world, right? California is embracing that whole concept where it's less on the mallow and less on the new oak, and more on emphasis of quality and acid, which is really adapted to the Mediterranean climate that comes from. To have those big soupy wines is really kind of hard when you have these fresh, lively foods and warm temperatures, right? Couple of handles to keep up. If you want to mention any of this on social, please use the hashtag #DrinkChenin. please mention wines of South Africa. It's been a tough year for everyone. It's been a tough year specifically for South Africa due to embargoes and prohibition of alcohol sales both domestically and abroad. And the wine industry contributes to the GDP significantly of South Africa. So there are times over this past year where nothing could be exported and then that would flip over and nothing could be sold domestically. So they've been going through some particular issues in addition to everything else going on. And all they're trying to do is get us some juice, right? So I've been, buying with my wallet as of late, meaning consciously. I think this is a trend that's going on. That's something to just definitely bring up. Don't drink these wines because you feel you have to, but there's many reasons. There's some great things that are coming to us at phenomenal prices. I personally would like to emphasize that. That's been the whole point of Pierce Freedom. It's been the whole point of that's what attracted me to South Africa in general, and to work with all these people. And then you see things like what Bruvere's created with an $80 Chenin that totally hits, right? Like, anyway, can I open up the floor to anyone? Would anyone like to say anything? Not really? Sweet. Did you answer all your Chenin questions?
Maybe on that point, about what you made about fresher styles, I really think that definitely something that have changed from a producer point of view and style point of view. And I specifically saw that happening literally over the last 3 years, where people are moving away from that more heavier style and look towards drinkability, and try to keep the concentration and the weight and the mouthfeel, but not necessarily using oak like you and Jacques is doing, with finding, we use some concrete eggs for that to get more texture into the wine. You can do it with skin contact, and trying to move away from heavier Chenin Blancs, which I think is, I really like that. On that point, I think Lauren have asked me maybe to just show this wine, which is the Raad's original Chenin Blanc, which is 100% stainless steel fermented, original meaning the original flavor of the grape. So it's 100% Chenin, 100% dry, 100% stainless steel. Obviously also from Polka Rails, and it's really trying to show Chenin Blanc in its purest form by that beautiful minerality, that precision, that sort of thing. And this is quite available in Canada. So Lauren did ask me to just show the bottle and talk about it briefly.
It's also, for the West Coast here, Lifford would be bringing it in, which I believe it's select now, though I don't think there's much of a footprint for Raad's out there as of yet. And I think we need to encourage that, because it's something that hits the price points, the quality dollar value, and should be represented specifically in the West. I think it would be pretty cool to have out there.
Yeah, no, we definitely want to be there.
Yeah, sweet.
Well, if I can just add one thing to the discussion about Chenin Blanc, I think enough time now has passed that we're never gonna forget about where Chenin Blanc is come from in South Africa. The story is part of our understanding of the grape. But I want everyone to understand that Chenin Blanc, the scene in South Africa, is dynamic. We're all the time finding out more about Chenin Blanc in South Africa. And I mean, lately, the push has been to planting Chenin Blanc in cooler climates. There's a lot of cooler climates that have been reserved for the likes of Sauvignon Blanc for many, many years. And now we're seeing guys making banger Chenins from cooler climates. There's a few guys in Elgin that are doing interesting things out towards Stanford in the Walker Bay. This place really benefits from the maritime influence. And you know, I mean, as much as we want to have Stellenbosch feature a very, very maritime influence or climate, there are places in South Africa and the Cape that have more of this. So I regard this as the next frontier, you know, planting Chenin Blanc in places that were once reserved for other varieties. And so, you know, that's the next chapter, I think, and it's exciting times.
Cool. Well, if there are no other comments, we'd like to leave you on a high note here. Please continue to tell the story of Chenin Blanc. It's always great to be the, at least from my perspective, the underdog or something, or pushing something up that hill. It's so much more satisfying. And when you have phenomenal wines such as this, I'd like to thank Jacques and Bruvert for their time and for their expertise, the cumulative expertise of all this time that you spent making wine. We get this one little snapshot. It's, I think, you know, it takes more than 5 minutes to make a wine. So we should spend a bit more time to observe these things, but you've done a phenomenal job to translate both in the bottle and here. So thank you very much. And then Wines of South Africa for continuing to fight the good fight and push their message forward in a very cognizant and organic way. Very much appreciate that. I put a link to a survey up here, if you wouldn't mind, please, to fill in. If that link, I'm having some troubles with the links there, but if not, we're going to send it out. We'd love your feedback so we understand what we can do better each time, how we can make this great. We will get back to tasting in person. We will be bringing that kind of sunshine to you as soon as we humanly can, hopefully this summer. I'm going to put the pressure on Laurel there, and we'll do something outside perhaps. It'll be pretty wicked. But and thank you all for taking an hour today out of your day, your busy day, to do that. I'm available, and Laurel and both Jacques and Bruvert are available. We'll follow up with all the notes and contact information if you haven't already received.